I was recently finishing up with a delivery when I saw this helicopter with a tree trimmer flying nearby. I could tell just by the way it was flying and where the area was that it was getting ready to land, probably either for maintenance or they were just finishing up a job, so I decided to film it for a couple minutes. Now, helicopters have always fascinated me. They just have something about them just always really intrigued me. Let alone when you put a saw on the end of it, it really makes it even 10 times cooler. I definitely learned a lot this day. After I filmed, I went over and was actually talking to the guys. But it's a really cool process and a really cool setup, so I figured I'd share with you guys. So right here, he's getting ready to park and let the saw down. Now, I've always just assumed this is just a big long cable. They just kind of lowered it to the ground, disconnected, and it was a simple process. But after watching closely, I kind of learned that it wasn't quite like I thought it was. If you notice, he's trying to be very steady. He's trying to get the saw in a particular direction, turn it a certain way, and he's very gently lowering it to the ground. This takes a lot of practice and some good eyesight. I also learned later on that I thought they had a big hole in the bottom of the helicopter they could see and look straight down, or maybe a camera, but this isn't the case. He basically has a side door bubble that they put on where he can kind of lean out a little bit and look down. It's all by sight and all by feel. There are no sensors, there are no cameras, like I said. It's all by sight and by feel. So he has to get really steady to get the saw position just right and gently start to lower it down. Now, ideally, I would like to be a little closer filming this, but this was just kind of spur of the moment. And without contacting them first, I wasn't really sure if this would be okay or how close I'd be allowed to get. So I had to just kind of film from a distance, so I apologize. But if you notice, he's just kind of hovering right now and getting things positioned just right. He's starting to turn the copter and back up. I would have just assumed the cable dropped straight down, but as you can see, he's backing up and lowering down as he goes. Just very slowly, nice and easy. Now, this company is called Aerial Solutions. They're based out of North Carolina, but they actually have pilots all over the US. You can basically live anywhere and work for this company. It's not like you have to be at the shop every day for a meeting or something, it's just here and there, but they can essentially work from anywhere. So he went down very slowly and he kept backing up as he was going until he landed safely on the ground. So this is actually what it looks like up close. I always assumed this was a cable, but actually the saw was held together by these aluminum poles. 134 feet was the total length from the helicopter down to the bottom of the saw. This is the saw itself. Each of those brackets is where a saw blade goes. I believe it was 9 or 10. This is the motor. This weighs about 900 pounds and it's a gasoline engine that runs this saw. I never would have thought that. They want to keep it light and compact, so that's why it's a gasoline motor. They said it's about the same one that's on your lawnmower at home. They store the saw blades on their truck. They've got these really fine tips on them. The helicopter itself is actually pretty small. It's usually just the pilot in there. They've got a guy in the ground with a walkie-talkie that will kind of help direct them as needed. This is where the saw hooks up underneath there. This is them loading the saw onto their truck so they can move on to the next job, which is, they weren't really sure at this point, but probably a couple states away. They just load all the poles and the saw itself onto one truck, and the helicopter will just fly and meet the driver there. The guys were very nice and let me take some pictures and answered a ton of questions I had. They were just very informative. You can look up their website online, aerialsolutions.com. They've got all sorts of information and quite a few media pictures. It says 1985 is when the company was founded. I forget how many helicopters, or they call them birds, they have. I think it was around 10 or 11. Like I said, they go all across the U.S. trimming trees on power lines, gas lines, or wherever a customer calls and has a need. Here's a good picture of them parking a saw. Now I have to lay it down and be careful they don't bend the rods. But they've got all sorts of information, and the guy said they're always hiring. You can check out if you want to be a pilot, you can be a ground crewman or mechanic. Essentially, for me, what it seemed like is a pilot flies, and there's always a ground guy there. He's got a truck, he can work on things, and he also kind of spots for the pilot. But some jobs, I'm sure, a little different. They might require more ground guys. But it seems like every job at least has 2 guys, and they just kind of go about their day-to-day business. You can look at their fleet. It tells you what kind of helicopters. It's a cool picture. Airplane. But basically what the guy was telling me was they are the pioneer in this industry. Like, they are the longest standing company that's been around doing this. They kind of set the bar. He says they go all over the place trimming power lines, and they've got a strong, very strong safety record. I was asking if he had ever gotten in any bad situations or dangerous spots, or what the protocol is if you get your saw stuck. And he said they can release the saw if they have to. It's basically just like a U-joint at the end, and there's a lever they pull to release it. But he says that's absolutely worst case scenario, last resort, and he doesn't know of anybody having to do that. He's never done that himself. Obviously, this stuff is very expensive. You want to take care of it, and you don't want to just be dropping it. To me, the most interesting thing I learned was that they are just aluminum rods bolted together with little Allen bolts. I always thought, for whatever reason, it was a cable that the saw hung down from, but I was wrong. Just a very cool operation. These guys made my day by letting me take some pictures and ask some questions. Again, check them out, aerialsolutions.com, or other videos on YouTube.